Have you ever experienced something so crippling in your life that has made you feel broken? I have. Are you someone who has a giving heart but is struggling to feel good themselves? Are you consistently putting your needs aside to take care of everyone else? If so, you're not alone. Giving starts with giving to yourself so that you are able to give of yourself to other people. Isn't it time you took back control and discovered what makes you tick? Join me in my journey and find out how you can feel better about yourself, live your best life, and share that with others. Thinking of yourself, it doesn't make you selfish, it makes you brave. I'm Nelia, and this is the Giving Starts With You podcast. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Giving Starts With You podcast. I'm your host, Nelia Hutt. I am so excited to meet my new friend online, virtually, but it feels like she's right here in front of me. You know, sometimes these relationships, they just feel so close. I'd love to introduce you to Susan De Lorenzo. How are you, Susan?
Nelia, it's nice to be with you. Thank you. I'm really enjoying already. Nelia and I have already been chatting away and we're loving it.
Yes, I love genuine conversations. It's just beautiful. So you guys are in for a treat. You know, this podcast is all about how things sometimes can break us, but we don't have to let them. And Susan is here to speak to us about, some of these topics. And I just want to let you know a little bit more about who she is. And yeah, so grab something comfortable, grab a blanket, or if you're in your car, yes, keep an eye on the road. But please, you know, if you've got it, if I know that there's going to be things that are said today that are going to be brilliant during our conversation. So if you have to pause and come back to it later.
I was saying, no pressure, Susan. Yeah, you can be brilliant. Come on.
Oh, no pressure at all. So, Susan, she is a coach, but she's also a breast cancer survivor. She helps women who are emerging from life-altering adversities, which is all of us, really, and guides them to evaluate the insights and the wisdom that such times hold for us. She believes that dark times hold gems. And I really want this to be the center of our conversation today because I really know that this is going to help a lot of our listeners. I want to say so many things about already, like I just met Susan and she's just an incredible listener too. You know, we were talking and people don't think that that's a skill, but I love it. We were having this engaged conversation before we hit record, and maybe I'll actually share a bit of it later on. But I can just tell she's easy to work with, that she cares about what she does, that she's passionate, but she also has the training behind her coaching. She has personal story that I think she will share with us today on how she got here and why she became a coach and why this is important to her. She's also got a book that she's in that is in the works. So I'd love for her to talk a little bit about that. And Susan, where are you tuning in today? Where are you located?
Oh, I'm now, as of a year now, I'm in Nokomis, Florida, which is on the Gulf Coast, south of Tampa, right near Sarasota, Florida.
Sounds warm.
It is super warm in the summer, but it is beautiful. And it's been, we're talking about adversity, and I was sharing with Nelia just a little bit about what, sometimes you think you gave at the office when it comes to adversity, like, boy, that was awful. I'm sure nothing, that must have done it for the rest of my life now. The rest should be at least not as bad as that. This year, really rivaled almost going through breast cancer and then followed up with divorce. And I'll share that story with you. But yeah, that was the year of moving to Florida, getting what I believe was COVID, getting through a very exhausting illness, and then having to take care of my younger sister who was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, what seemed very suddenly as I was moving into a new home. uh, all of us rallying as she's a single mom and having to care for her. She deteriorated so fast. It was like caring for a baby. You know, she just was so weak and couldn't think straight. It was exhausting. And I wasn't still very strong yet. And then she passes away 2 months later after we did, you know, it was just so fast, devastating. And I think that's why I ended up sleeping from the middle of May to maybe August. I just did not have any life force energy, very little. I just had enough to just coast and sit in the sun or sleep. And so I finally started getting it back just by doing a little bit of yoga in the morning and going for a walk. And all of a sudden, I felt like some more energy going through my body, and I took a little more interest in what I was doing. I was always coaching. I managed to still coach my clients, and I never lost the love of that. And I think that was my anchor
Mm.
doing all of this, that it was like, no, you're still here. Your sister's gone. The life you used to have in New England is gone, but you, this is what you do. And it's just that little reminder when I'd get on the phone with these folks every week, I'd be like, oh yeah, this, I love this, you know? And then I went back and I started working on my manuscript again and with fresh eyes. And yeah, now I'm having a happy life in Florida and not a very disoriented life.
Yes, you've been through a lot in a very, very short amount of time. It's like compounded losses, right? It's just,
Yes.
it's tough. We were talking about grief and how, for me, it was one of the things that I felt broke me. And I know a lot of what we want to talk about today is how do you get through all of that? How can you see the gems, as you call them? How can we see the gifts when we're faced with all of this sadness and heartbreak? And it's hard, sometimes when we're in that moment, we can barely even lift our heads. So when
No.
people say, hey, there's a good side to this, we're like, what do you mean? Are you crazy? But little by little, you learn to see those sides. And why is it so important? Why would you think it's so important for us to be able to see the gifts in tragedies and adversities?
Well, equally important is, yeah, we are allowed to have feelings. But I think when we're in the middle of something like grief or about to lose someone, I think you were sharing that you knew your father was passing, or I don't want to expose too much of your story if you don't want, but we can get ahead of ourselves with the emotions. Somebody, I just learned this phrase, anticipatory grief.
Mm,
So we are already going down the road of sadness and despair before we even get there. And I think we can do that in any adversity. Also, when I was diagnosed with cancer, um, I already had one foot in the grave. And I had an 18-month-old baby. And I immediately thought, oh my God, he's not going to remember me. He's not going to remember how much I loved him. My mother died, her mother died when my mother was 18 months old,
oh,
and she didn't remember her mother. So I was just like, oh God, no, don't let that happen. Well, the cancer, while it was invasive, didn't kill me. It wasn't fun, but our minds, I want you to notice how our mind almost wants to go to the worst thing and then think, okay, what am I going to do about that? What could I possibly do? How can I it's almost like you're testing like an impulse or in your brain, like, okay, if this happened, what would I do? Because
mm,
there is that side of us, that little problem solver part of us that's like, well, if that happens, I'm going to do this. Think about the number of, I mean, the next one that happened to me was that my husband left after treatment ended. And that was when I went up to the bathroom and yelled out to God, do you think I could just have a year off?
mm.
Because it was really a 1-2 punch that I was like, you got to be kidding me. I was all happy. I'm done with treatment. We had a big party in the yard. I thought, wow, now where was I in my fabulous life? Which
Right.
really wasn't so fabulous. I think that was my wake up call to get a fabulous life.
Mm,
But you're asking me about pulling that gem. And I think it's in the present moment. I was describing how we move ahead of that moment and we're anticipating grief, pain, despair, not enoughness, that we don't have enough within us to handle whatever is coming our way. And what I find adversity does, it demands things of us that are in there that we didn't know we had. Courage, compassion, patience, trust, faith. I had to call upon all those things. And it wasn't like, I was handed a menu. Which one of these would you like to use today? I just said, oh, this calls for this. I started with a journal and I would write about all the medical decisions I had to make, and all the meetings with the doctors. I'd bring that notebook and I'd be like, okay, I can have this kind of reconstruction, I could have this kind of chemo, I could have reconstruction later. And, just so many. And I had like 4 or 5 surgeries. So I was meeting with like 2 oncologists and 2 different surgeons. So I had a lot of notes and a lot of confusion, but the main thing I started doing was affirming in my notes, I have the best doctors. I have all I need in support. And I would just start, and I didn't know a whole lot about this stuff before. I felt like I was downloading and just started affirming and calling on, I was taken to church as a kid, but it wasn't always, I like singing in the choir, but I wasn't really into the liturgy as much. And I just remember at one point, some of these really severe lines, I'd be like, hey, I thought this guy loved us, because they were like, you
Relate.
can't even eat the crumbs under my table, or whatever those lines were before communion. And so this was more real. This was the one I was hoping was there in terms of a divine connection that was going to keep me at peace, and keep me aligned with what I did want, and not what I was afraid I would be losing or would never have, and would just be alone on this horrible abyss of an adversity and not have what I need. And I was proven right. There was a lot of grace in that avenue.
Mm.
And it wasn't perfect. It wasn't like I didn't bawl my eyes out or rail against it. The other thing I would point out to your listeners is give up resistance. Give up the need to control or to say this isn't happening to me. You're going to have opinions about all of this. You're going to have real feelings about it. If you can let go, it's going to flow. It's the resistance almost causes like a knot right in your, I don't know, what is that? Your sternum, you're right around your heart, but it's like almost a little higher than that for me. And then the gut punch when you get bad news, of course.
Mm.
So there's going to be a period of shock, of upset. But I mean, when I found out that I was going to have chemo and I knew what the side effects were, I was like, I don't want to do this. I remember my husband at the time was about to walk out the door, and I had just learned, we had just driven home from this meeting with the surgeon, and he's telling me I can't have any more children, don't plan on having any more children right now. That would be unwise. We don't know if you're going to live. And so it felt like this baby was ripped out of my arms that I already had picked names for, in my mind, if it was a boy or a girl. And then now I've got to have chemo. And it was just, and then my husband had just shared, well, it's just as well I didn't want another baby, foreshadow to the idea that I'm not going to be married to him much longer either. So
Wow.
I had a lot that I didn't like in that meeting, and I just yelled that out. I don't want to do this. And he just turned to me really calmly and said, well, you have to.
Mm.
And yeah, we don't have a whole lot of alternatives when something is facing us like that. So we can ask ourselves, who do I need to be in this situation? It may be something I've never had to use before. And I want to remind people too, it's good to have support. I had support with a social worker at the Cancer Institute. I had a group of other women that were going through breast cancer also. That was amazing. So I really want to encourage listeners too, when you are going through such a severe anguish time,
Mhm.
to find some help. And there are resources where you're not going to have to spend a ton.
I heard you say at first you were just downloading, right? So were you even intentional? Like, was it even your intention to say, or like, how do I say this? When you were downloading and writing down, like in the beginning of what you were saying about the chemo and the different choices of medical appointments and things like that, was it even in your thought process what you were doing, or was it just, I need to get it off my chest, I need to get it on paper? And was it not till later on that you noticed, hey, this was a great thing that I was doing?
Yeah,
Because
that
sometimes,
is,
yeah, sorry, because sometimes, like, sometimes we don't know until years later that, oh my God, these were gifts. And it sounded like you started off by just downloading, but quickly you realized that, hey, this is going to help me.
that is a great observation. And I had to almost smile inwardly when you were talking about how did you just start writing like that? And I have to share that I was an administrative assistant. I was always taking notes at meetings, and I just almost can't help myself, and take notes. And so that was, even when I got my bad news on that invasive cancer diagnosis. I had um, a bad diagnosis on, I at first had an easy diagnosis on my left breast, and that one was settled right away. The right breast, it was just an exam to follow up on the operation on the left breast. And the oncologist says, has anybody talked to you about the lump in your right breast?
Hmm.
So that's where that's where things really hit the fan. And it was invasive. It had started to go into the lymph nodes. And here I get the news, and I was only allowing myself to believe that it was just the same as the left breast. Like the surgeon, when he did the biopsy, described it as worrisome. And I said, oh, worrisome. How can I make that word okay? How can I
Mhm.
delude myself? And I said, oh, well, it probably just means that it's definitely what I had in the left breast, which was like stage
Mhm.
0. So
The way we think
I,
about things and our
yeah,
perception.
yeah, it
Wow.
just was that was the way I could sleep at night until I got the information. And then I hear it's invasive, and I checked out, but the administrative assistant in me just kept taking the notes. Okay, it's lobular and ductal carcinoma, and yeah, blah blah blah. I'm just writing it out. And then when he finished, he's telling me I've got to go in for another surgery, and that one didn't get it all either. I found out, and then I had to go get another one. And I I just I think that's when I noticed, especially when I go back and read the notes back in my home and have to weigh everything out. That's where I started to find resonance in certain things.
So Susan, I agree. It's one, writing is a great way, even if you don't enjoy the writing process, it's a great way to let your feelings out.
Hmm.
Most of my listeners know that, when I went through grief, it took me 12 years to start to let my feelings out. And I didn't find the gifts in the moment. I think it was so wise of you when you were doing that, and you were, even without knowing intentionally, I'm downloading, I'm doing all of these things. It's so, it's something I think more people would do, like would benefit from doing that. It's okay to let your feelings out in the moment, because I think if I didn't do that, and I think if I had done that and just downloaded, maybe it just would have helped me process. It's be kind to myself.
Hmm.
It doesn't, nothing cures grief, nothing
No, or
cures,
makes cancer great, right?
no,
Yeah.
it makes you feel good about somebody leaving that you've been with, and you share your life with. Nothing is gonna make that feel better. But I think giving yourself that kindness, it does maybe help a little bit, and that's what we're here. Like, nothing that we say today is going to take everybody's pain away. But the fact that we can open our minds and say, we can really find gifts from this, that to me is amazing. You know, we were talking about hope earlier on, and I think finding the gems, finding the gifts in these times of horrible things that happen to everybody, has things that happen to us that make us feel lonely, make us feel unworthy, that make us, I always say, that break us sometimes, because sometimes we do feel like we're never going to come back from this, you know.
Yeah.
And you were
Yeah.
saying, how can I just have a year off? It's like when there's one thing after another, you lose your ground that you're standing on. You don't know what's up, what's down.
Yeah.
So I love that you help people find the gifts in tragedy, because I don't think people even can admit that there's gifts. Like, what do you mean there's something good that's going to come out of this?
And I don't want people to think that you're going to find them all right away. You
Mm,
know, there is a period of time that creates distance, and you start to get some insight and some reflection. The things that came to me, I would say a couple of years later, was just how badly I thought of myself. I had terrible, terrible self-esteem. I really thought I was just here to hold the world together. And, you know, I didn't even put myself on the list. You know, they say, you know, put yourself at the top of the list, and, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup and all of that. I didn't get that memo. And so I just thought I was here to, you know, make everybody else feel better. And here I was, you know, ducking out with a cancer diagnosis. And it really added up to, um, you know, how disease is created. Many horrible things in our lives are really a springboard for awareness.
mm,
And I would not have considered how I was thinking about myself, what low to none expectations for my life other than, gee, hope I have a house, hope I have a kid, be nice to be married.
mm,
And nothing beyond that. So yeah, a couple of years, and I was started, and I knew I was cancer free, and that was the first burst of, oh man, I want to travel, I want to, you know, have fun, but I still had a job that was really boring. And like I called it my corporate cubicle job. And it really, here I am, a single mom. I'm not going to quit my job. I think, oh no, you know, I've got to have those benefits.
mhm.
I've got to pay the mortgage. And, you know, it was really not even, and yet I'd still feel it. Like there'd be this little voice that would say, how much longer do we have to do this? Like I was some group in me. Hey, we quit. We don't want to do this. Why do you
I
keep
get
walking
it.
into this building? Right.
Mhm.
And I longed for the fun in my life. I wanted fun. I wanted freedom, but I didn't see how those two things could happen until I was laid off. And that was the other boom. Okay, all right. If I can, I've got a severance, and now can I find something I love to do? And even then, I was afraid to go too big. I thought, well, you know, I just won't work in financial. I can still do marketing, but I'll do it for holistic stuff because I've learned so much about my body and how I really want to live my life going forward for my health. And it really wasn't right away like, oh, I'll be a life coach. I'm going to help people, you know? It really was a process. When I did sign up for life coaching after my second layoff, hello, universe trying to get my attention. That's not it. Let's get her out of there. Um, that's when I talked to somebody. Something came up on my Facebook page that said, would you like to be a speaker, a teacher, a coach? I said, yeah, click. And I learned about this program that spoke about everything I'd kind of learned going through cancer, that you create your own reality, that you can overcome any odds against you. There really is, it's if it's good or bad, it's really what you say it is that makes it real to you or not. You know, so she was just going on about things. I'm going, hey, you're speaking my language. I'm going to click again and find out who I need to talk to. Well, I got that far and we're having a great conversation. And then she tells me how much it's going to cost me to do it. And I remember like my credit card shaking in my hand because I'm living on severance at this point and looking for a job again.
Oh, uh-huh.
But I did it. I said, I know it's my fear talking. And I gave her the card. My knees were knocking. I wanted to throw up. And I got off the phone call. I sat down and I said, I did the right thing. And if we only could get through that awful moment, because I want to tell you, that felt like adversity too. And isn't that interesting that the adversity of cancer, the adversity of divorce, of losing a loved one, they call upon us to pull out something we didn't know we had. Now, what if we all did that for something we wanted,
Mm,
that we tell ourselves we can't have? We're going to fail. We're going to lose all our money. You know, whatever the story is we're telling ourselves. If we saw, you know, we had to be brave, or we were just going to fall and melt into a puddle, right? Or we did the best we could. We brought as much as we could to that situation, and we came out of it. We didn't love it. We didn't think anything of it at the time until you get a little further,
mhm,
which is what I was talking about. You know, a couple years later, you're starting to say, hey, I got some stuff out of this. I didn't. No one walks away empty handed from an adversity unless they just decide to live in it. If you can see, who was I? What was my role in this event? You know, what did it bring out in me? Like before, I had a life of low self-esteem, low expectations, longing, and discontent. Afterwards, I had excitement because I almost lost my life. I did decide that living was good. I was going to do that, and that I was going to live even better and have more fun. And my husband at the time did me the biggest favor, because if I had stayed with somebody who had depression and I was codependent with that depression, I would have had more of the same and struggled to find my way to have what I said I was going to have after I came through cancer. I really don't know if I'd be alive if I stayed in that marriage. I think whatever caused that cancer was a loss of hope,
mm,
and poor eating habits and whatever else. Um, but I didn't get that right away. That took a little reflection. That took some distance. So I want listeners to know they don't have to have it all figured out to know that it's going to be okay. And that's where staying in touch with those insights and asking yourself those kind of questions, going for walks, even swimming in a swimming pool. There's something meditative about certain things we do. Music, you've mentioned that too. These things take us out of our to-do list and into some reflection. And that's where we get these insights. And these things are like the little launch pad into things that are new for us. And that's where we can dream.
mm. It's so easy to be stuck in the day to day and how we live our lives that sometimes it takes something huge to wake us up, or several things. You know, like I can see you. I've had a moment like that too. So when you were talking about, you know, you've got the credit card, it's shaking, you know, you want to invest in yourself, but you're like, I can't really. And then, you know, and then at that moment, you just take a risk and you take a chance. And I think a lot of us just play too safe
Yeah.
sometimes, and if we don't take that risk and become uncomfortable, sometimes our growth stops. And I think it does start when we become uncomfortable and we're taking that little risk. And in that moment, that was great self care, right? So you took a chance on yourself. You're like, what if this doesn't work? But what if it does? I'll never know until I do it. And I think that that's brave, you know, to do
It
that,
was,
because
yeah.
we're just talking about it here, but when you think of your own situation, you know, with you, you had a you had a young child, you were just
Mm,
laid off. Like when you actually think about what that means or what that feels like, because sometimes we talk about things, you know, in conversation and in interviews and just day-to-day life, and we kind of rush by them and we don't really think, sit and how does that really feel for somebody, right? We talk about death, we talk about this, we talk about loss of jobs and divorce and all these things. And each of the things you went through is so big in itself. Had just one of those things happened, it still would have been tough, and you had one after the other after the other. And do you ever think back and say, what if I didn't? What if I didn't take that chance on myself? Where would I be now? What if my husband didn't leave and nothing changed, like you said? Sometimes what we feel comes out in our health, as
Yes.
learning about holistic, and you just don't know. What if I hate to say this, but what if the cancer came back? Because of all of these things we bury, we don't take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
And I just, on this show, we talk a lot about self-care. And one of the things that I love is that you also believe that self-care isn't selfish. And self-care can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. And when you were talking about the credit card in that moment, I've been there. It's kind of like I'm like, oh my God, I had the same thing happen. And I was like, in that moment, you're like, oh, still afraid once you put the payment through and you're still afraid. But then after you had that conversation and you're like, oh my God, this feels so right for me.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can give so much that you lose yourself. And I'm all about giving back. So the fact that that moment happened for you is amazing. I love hearing about that, because in that moment, you knew that you would be able to give more by giving to yourself, right? So
Right.
I love that.
Yeah. And what if we could all get more comfortable with those moments and just say, that is the toll booth. That's the toll booth to what I want.
Mm.
And yet, anybody else who could have seen it, just on paper would have said, wow, that is so irresponsible. You're a mother and you're using your, what are you doing? Um, what if we could all just say, that is my toll booth. These uncomfortable feelings are really like a toll booth. And it's that phrase, when you talk about self-care, that phrase, it really says it all, that you can't pour from the empty cup. And yet we try. What I describe that as, I'm a girl with many analogies or metaphors, is it's like squeezing out that last bit of toothpaste onto the toothbrush. I've got it just enough more to make dinner or whatever it is, and then I got to go to bed. Okay, you need help with your homework. Okay,
Mm.
so it's really necessary. It's not a luxury. It's necessary, and it's the best way you're going to be here. And you mentioned, what if he didn't leave me? And what if I didn't have this job? And I was given I went to a writer's workshop, and they said, write a story of something that didn't happen to you.
Mm.
And I picked this moment where I had come through cancer, and my mate, this is the true part of the story. He offered to stay and be a father to our son, but no longer a husband to me.
Mm.
And in reality, I said, I didn't fight for my life to have this for my life. I
Mm.
couldn't accept that. So in the story, I did.
Oh,
I wrote out the whole thing, and in it, I got cancer again and I passed away. But I mean, there were so many layers to this that separate rooms. I talked about how we
profound.
would have lived and blah, blah, blah. And when I got done reading it to the group, they're like, oh my God, did that really happen? I'm like, no, I'm still here. See, I'm still alive.
What a great
So
exercise.
it really showed me, and it showed me, wow, I just definitely made the right decision. And it's interesting, before he really left the home, because he didn't leave right away um, after he said he wanted to, and it was financial, trying to figure it out, get the
Logistics.
finance. Oh gosh, it's a pain. So he was there, and it was still even living with somebody who doesn't want you anymore, that's not fun. So just as he was I'd say 4 months before he actually left, I found a lump in my only remaining breast. And I was like, oh no, I went to all the trouble to have like reconstructive surgery and, all this other stuff. And now I've got this only one real one left, and it's got a lump in it. So I had a biopsy, And I was just like, this guy's got to go. I can't live like this, and I'm sure there's more to it than that, but it just raised the red flag for me
Mm.
that I've got to put things right for me.
And it's hard. It's hard to find the energy when you don't have any left to give. It's very tough, but it's almost like, okay, survival mode. I need things to change.
Yeah.
What do you do for self-care now? Like, I know we both agree that self-care isn't selfish. It's so necessary.
Yeah.
It's necessary for us, for our children, for the people around us. What do you do like day to day for your own self-care, Susan?
This is going to sound counterintuitive, but I actually get up earlier because I love to have time for myself. And I just start by stretching in the morning and doing some meditation and journaling. Sometimes I'll do affirmations or I'll go for a walk. And it centers me for the day. Have a warm drink and watch the sun come up or whatever it is. But it's that I'm having that moment and nobody's interrupting it. And it sets the tone for the day because I can decide, sometimes I'll visualize like how my day is going to go. Even like my interview with you here today is going fabulous. But yeah, I love to set the tone, but also like almost put my hand on my own heart
Mm,
and take that moment with myself.
I love it.
And you don't need a lot of time to do that. If you could just commit to when I say you, listeners and all, um, commit to just the 15 minutes and don't let anyone know you're up.
And the more
Try to
you
make
do
it a
it,
secret. Yeah.
yeah, it might be hard at first, but the more you do it, the more you want it and you
And then your
need it.
body looks forward to it. Yeah. It's just like, whoop, it's 6 a.m. or it's 5:45. Come on. And you know who wrote a fabulous book is Hal Elrod, The Miracle Morning, and he uses it for motivation and going after goals. But if you do nothing else with it, you're going to set a tone for your day, and it does inspire the rest of your day to look so much better. You have more
It's on
patience
my
for
list.
your family. Yeah, I'm just better at how I speak with my spouse, my elderly father,
Mhm.
even my dog. I'm just a
And
better
yourself.
person and myself. Yeah, so much more patience. So that is my top recommendation is because that's I think the easiest one to do. The other things would be, yeah, I do go and get a massage. I do take Epsom salt baths and I need to get out and have fun and watch like even if it's not like a funny movie or something. I love to laugh. Um, Being in nature, that is a huge one for me. And I think when you're going through, we were talking about grief earlier. I couldn't get outside enough. I
Mm,
think there's something so healing, whether it's being by the ocean, in the woods, those are moments. But seeing this beautiful color of green or blue, watching animals, even beautiful insects like butterflies, it really is a timeout. Your brain is taking its time with you.
mm. It's interesting that you say that because I haven't shared this on the show before, but after my father died, you know, I was driving through some back roads. He's about an hour from me, and there was this cornfield, and the sun was just, I don't know, the blue was just so blue. I was having a
Mm.
really tough time, and I stopped on the side of the road, and I something in that moment, I just had to feel like something was bigger than my what I was going through because it was just so big. And I went through the cornfield by myself and just sat down on the floor and looked up
Oh, marvelous.
and just cried, and
Mm.
I just felt like, oh my God, to me, this is everything, but there's a world out there with other people going through the same thing. It's not, my life isn't going to break, and I just, in that moment, just kind of got centered and felt not my problem just seemed not as big in the whole scheme of things. And it just allowed me to come off of that edge a little bit. And sometimes we go, I don't know, sometimes it was just, I would pause at a street light and the song would come on. And
Mm.
it's just, sometimes I would listen to, especially when I was grieving, I would listen to music that was not in English
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't want to hear what they were singing about. It was like the chanting and the music. And I mean, I love everything from heavy metal to, like classical, everything. And kind of play what's my mood, at the moment. But sometimes when I just want to feel and I don't want to really listen to the words, or I don't want to listen to something I've heard before, because then I don't know, it's just when you hear something for the first time, you can just let yourself feel like the music, the notes, the pauses, all of those things. And it just grounded me a little bit. But
Yeah.
like you said, sometimes you don't see the gifts for years after.
Well, I loved the experience you shared in the cornfield, and what I pictured, and this is the earth, this is our Mother Earth, is you're being held, and it's beautiful, soulful energy. It's an entity of its own, and you're on the ground and it's supporting you.
Mm,
It's emotionally supporting you too, not just supporting your body. And then you have the corn up and encasing you and holding you also. And then this beautiful blue sky reminding you that you matter and we see you down there. There's just so much to that scene that is
it,
so gorgeous. I didn't want anybody to miss that. That was just so
Well,
gorgeous.
it felt like I was being swallowed by the cornfields, but also let
Mm,
free at the same time. It was very
mm,
surreal. And
yeah.
yeah, it was just allow yourself to do things that you don't normally do in your day-to-day life. Get
And you can't get
outside.
that in your bedroom, Nelia. You got
No.
to be outside with that. That is an energy that it centers us. And that's why people hug trees.
Mm,
That's why people sit at the base of a tree and they picture their roots, their spine growing down with the roots into the earth, because these are energetic healings.
mm.
And that's free. That doesn't
Yeah,
cost you what, 150 an hour or whatever. So
yes.
that is beautiful. So there are many moments. So the day to day of getting up earlier and giving yourself that time, but that, like when you're going through an adversity and you can get outside, you can
Mm.
get by a beautiful body of water, or I just love the forest too. But even being on granite rocks, or there's just so many
Barefoot.
beautiful ways, barefoot, yes. uh, yeah.
In
And of
addition
course,
to,
let's not
yeah,
forget awesome friends. I'm sorry. I was
no,
going to say, let's not forget awesome loved ones. People who getting hugs. Oh my God. I needed lots of hugs when I was going through grief. And some people are going to disappoint you. That's something you may have heard. Two people the people you thought were going to be there, sometimes they can't do it for whatever reason. They don't have the equipment. There's something that makes it impossible for them to show up for you the way you thought they would. But in their place, your mind is blown by these people that do show up. And I think that balanced things out for me.
and that's the part of COVID that was very hard for me.
Yeah.
And for many of us, people who had never felt mental health issues before, who had never been, challenged with these things for the first time in their life, didn't know how to deal with stuff because they had never, really experienced that. And it was horrible, like the amount of people who lost their lives. But I kept thinking of the people that were left behind, knowing that they couldn't be with their loved ones, knowing the loneliness and the lack of human connection, so to me, self-care is all those things. It's also like, I love that you mentioned the hugging, and it's just caring about other people and caring
Mhm.
about yourself and putting up boundaries, right? Like when all those things happen to you or for you, however you want to
Yeah, four.
look at
But yeah,
that.
at the time it's two, but yeah, it's four.
But all those things happened. um it's so overwhelming, but when you can see the gifts, it allows you to also create boundaries, right, for your new relationships. Like when you end,
Oh yeah.
like, and prioritize things, and that's a self-care too, not letting people walk all over you, doing
Ye-
things that you want to do for yourself.
Yes. What I would add to that, Nalia, is only if you understand what your part is in that relationship. Like if I still didn't understand that I was codependent with people who had depression, I'd find another one. I know how to do this, and I'm sure you're much nicer than that last guy. And so yeah, we have to understand our part in that so we can say, oh, I get it. I don't have to do that anymore.
I
I
never
can
thought of
take,
that. Never thought
yeah,
of that
I
before.
don't have to do that anymore. I can choose again with awareness, because that's what we're after. It's the awareness of our gifts, right? The awareness of, what we're getting out of the deal, because it was a crummy deal at the time, and what our role was perhaps in the life that led up to it.
Mm.
And then what are the new choices we want to make? If I'm doing it, I get a do-over, right? And so if I get to choose, if I were guaranteed a win, what would that look like? Well, it's not going to look like a lot of the junk I was leaving. So what is it? That's where it's good to get out that journal again.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no one wants bad stuff to happen to them, but we're all no one can escape it. Like,
You can
the more
try, but
we learn,
yeah,
yeah,
you
the
can
more
delay it,
delaying it is even worse. I delayed
isn't
for
it?
12 years, and not
Yeah,
only was I still left with the grief, but all of these new problems. So yeah, don't delay. You know,
no,
it's hard. It's hard to go through things. But when you can find the gems, it's so important to find them because it helps you move forward.
that's the key. And that's it. It's what I call the gift in crappy wrapping paper. So it really is something that takes a little discovery, unwrapping, right? Through the icky wrapping paper,
I
if
love
we're going
that.
to go with that analogy. So it's something that you never asked for. But like I said, you don't walk away empty-handed. There's something in that you showed yourself, or it's trying to show you. It was never, ever meant to keep you in that awful spot.
Mm.
The death of someone, the loss of a limb, I'll just use that as something. It was never meant to say, oh, you're screwed for the rest of your life. That's it for you. You know,
Yeah.
Never meant for that. And it takes some thought, it takes some reflection, then it takes a plan, and then it takes action.
Yeah, all the well wishes in the world isn't going to put the work in for sure.
Yeah.
I can just from our conversation today, I've learned so much from you, and I've you know, just reiterate that people need to be there for one another too. And it's life is so hard to go through, and to do it alone. It's really tough. So yes, you need to ask for what you want. I know we briefly talked about it earlier, but if you're not kind to yourself, it doesn't matter what people around you think of you, say about you, do for you. If you're going to be down about who you are and just, oh, I'm doomed now, if we don't change the way that we think, we can't find the gems. And that's where people get stuck. I think a lot of people need help, need people like you to work with them so that you can help them. I love, and I so respect, and I say this a lot on the show because the guests that I bring on, I always say are the best guests. But, I always respect people who have been through something and turned that into their life's work, because not only do you have the training behind that, and that's fantastic. I prefer to work with somebody who has been through it themselves, because that you can't learn about that in a book. So the fact that you do that now and you found what you're really meant to do, I think it's fantastic. I think it's great that you're here and that you're helping other people do the same.
I love what I do. It really, it's a privilege. I think that's the word I would use. It's an absolute privilege to be a witness and a guide,
Mm.
because I'm learning from my client too. they are coming up with these realizations and I'm the witness to it. I'm like, did you hear what you just said? You know, and I'm like, I got to write that down. That's going, I'm using that. That is the privilege of the work, the joy of the work, and also the inspiration that I get every time I get to talk to someone.
I love it so much. I can tell. Your heart is in what you do.
Yeah.
Is there anything we didn't talk about today that you want to mention before we end on our beautiful conversation? Although I know we could talk forever, but
Yeah. It just came in almost like a little whisper in my ear. Don't wait. Don't wait. If there's still something that, you know, even if it's been years and you feel like you're still living in that awful time, and that I know people like that. They had a horrible betrayal in their life and they're never going to love again. They've vowed, you know, that there's just nobody worth being that vulnerable with again. That's one thing I've definitely seen. I say don't wait. You know, you don't want to look back on your life as you're coming to the close of it. And we never do really know when the close is, right? And we've seen that with COVID. Don't wait. Look now. Get help now. And write yourself a beautiful future. You do not have to resign yourself to more of the same and anything you don't like. There is a voice in there that's been trying, it's probably getting suppressed, like, go away. I can't do what you're asking me to do. That was mine. How much longer do we have to do this? Let's have some fun. Go away. I've got to work 9 to 5 and sit in this cubicle. Don't talk to me. So, yeah, I just want to encourage everyone that it's never too late. I don't care how old you are, how long it's been. You will never regret working on yourself and choosing for yourself.
thank you. That's amazing. There's always a before and after. You
Mm.
know, we're made of more than just one part. Like, yeah, the difference is amazing when you think of how your life was before certain thinking and after. And then you just want everybody to know that so that they can do the same, right? Life
Yeah,
is too short.
yeah, you said it. It's true. Once you figure it out, once I had that kind of happiness and I realized I didn't have to stay where I was, it's like, you know, you feel like you made this discovery that nobody else has made, and you've got to be like, you know, land ho.
You got to come with me. I can
I
show you
found a new
because
continent.
you know people don't have to suffer, you know. It's like, come, I'll show you how I did it. Because, you know, and it's not about doing all the things perfect. It's just about being human and about wanting that feeling of just helping each other, you know. Of course, when we succeed, it's like if I go on a trip and I had a fantastic time, I want everybody to come to that exact place, do the exact thing I did to experience that thing, you know. And it's just
Yeah.
so funny how life works out sometimes.
Don't worry. I just thought about just the last little tagline for what
Of
you just
course.
said is go through the toll booth. Go through that toll booth. It's what I invited you to do. With not waiting doesn't mean it's not going to cost you anything.
Mm.
All right. But it's worth it.
Yes. Shake with the credit card, but take the risk because you just never know, right?
That's right. That's right. So I'll let you close now. Thank
No,
you
it's
so much.
okay. It's okay. Yeah, no, I really did love our conversation today. And thanks everybody for listening. And you know, Susan's got a book coming out and she's going to let me know where everybody
I
can get
will.
it once it's out. And she's also starting a podcast. So
Yes, I just shared that for the first time with Nelia here.
I'm
Yeah.
very excited. So we'll keep you guys posted because not only does she have a beautiful voice, easy to listen to, but she's got such incredible things that I know she wants to talk about. So yeah, I'd love to put that out there once it's ready. And you know, I'm
Thank
excited for
you.
you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm delighted. And yeah, I already said Nelia's back on my program for sure.
Oh, thank you so much. So where can we find you? Can you let us know all of
Yes,
your website and
sure, sure. So website is super easy. It's susandelelorenzo.com, SusanDelorenzo.com. And if you wish to reach out to me, I'm at Susan at susandelelorenzo.com. You can also find me on a Facebook page that is facebook.com Dream Coach Susan. So those are a few places. And that's where I usually share some form of inspiration. And I'll be, of course, keeping people posted when that beloved day of that book coming out, and of course on the podcast. So thanks so much, Nelia. It was really great to be with you.
Oh, thank you so much. I can't wait to support you and all of the things that you're doing. I really think it's fantastic. I love your message. And I'm so glad they were able to, together, in this conversation, talk about how self-care isn't selfish and how you can find the beauty. Even if you can't see it at the moment, you can find the beauty in all things. And if it takes a while, it's okay. The most important thing is to not shut it down, not shut down the possibility that there can be something good at the end of the pain, right? Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. If you enjoyed what you heard, please subscribe or leave a review. See you next week on the Giving Starts With You podcast.